Welcome back, guys, for another episode here. We're kind of down to the final ones. Good Lord, how many episodes do we have at this point? These are kind of unexpected ones. The Gray Ghost is running. It's in the water. I had a breakthrough last week. You can see my video on the head gasket leak. So that's been one of the things vexing this thing and keeping me from doing some more updates for you to see. But got that fixed, and that made a huge difference. And so did another water test, and what I'm seeing is it doesn't run rough like it did. Doesn't run like a chuck wagon like it did up to, you know, 4,000 RPMs or so. But it does have a little bit of a shelf there. Well, actually, a lot of a shelf where it'll come up to about 4,000 RPMs. Not very responsive. Well, I'll explain why that is in a second with these carburetors, but it'll hover there and it won't go past that. You can tell it doesn't want to go past it. Squeeze the throttle all the way down, all the way opened, doesn't change it. If I give a little pump to the primer, just one little push while it's at that 4,000 RPM point, it instantly wants to bog it almost to the point of dying. I mean, just a little push, maybe even a half a push, which tells me it's not starving for fuel. And also, if I catch a wake or if I just am a little patient after 15, 20 seconds or so, it'll finally get past that. And once it gets up to about 45,000 RPM, it goes through the roof and screams like a scalded dog if scalded dogs scream. I assume a scalded dog will probably scream. They probably make some kind of a noise, but so real happy with it, top end, but I just can't get it smooth and responsive up to that 4,000, about 4,200 RPM limit. So because it runs so fast and so hard top end, I know it's getting gas. I know it's not starving for fuel, and because I can push on that primer, which squirts a little bit of gas in there, and it instantly affects it, I know that it's not starving for fuel. So I think what's happening is it's overloading on the bottom end because I went too rich on the carburetors. And then in 99 here, they stayed with a 2.0 needle and seat, 162.5. So notice they went up a little bit higher on the top end, which is what we have now, but a little lower on the bottom end at 75. And then notice the pop off here. Let me show you what we did. So what we did here is, we started off with our first swing at it was a 2.0 needle and seat, 162.5 there, and then we used a 82.5 low end, which was pretty rich. So that was pretty aggressive there. But look at the pop off. It's only 18. That's what we ended up with. I remember saying in my video that that's on the real low side, but let's just go with that, that may have been a mistake, rookie thing on my part. And so number two swing at it, we did a 2.0, left that the same, 162.5 high, and we went down a little bit in the jets here to 80. So we're creeping up on the little bit leaner, but that's still pretty rich compared to our 99 specs, which are 75, right? And still very low pop off at 18. So what I'm getting at is I still think we're really rich on the bottom end. And so what we're going to do in number 3 here, which is what this video is about, we're going to leave the needle and seat. I'm not going to really change that, no need to. We're going to leave the top end because that actually runs pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how the top end performed. And instead of going down to a 75, which is what, the specs say here, we're going to meet it halfway, and they actually make a 77.5 jet, which I happen to have right here. Thank you, OSD Marine, for that. I also have a 75 jet. If we do want to go down to that, we're prepared for that. But the key thing I'm going to focus in on here is we're going to downsize this just a little bit. But I think that this guy right here is our problem. I think our pop off is opening too soon. So I think we're on the right track with this one. So that's what this video is going to be about. And what we're going to start with on this is we're gonna do a pressure test on this first. Okay, one of the things I was going to show you that I forgot about is I already took it off, but this linkage here, that basically keeps these carburetors in sync is really important, especially at lower RPMs. And what I noticed is I thought that they were in sync from the last time, but when I just went to open, the main carb with the idle, which on this one is the PTO side because they're upside down. White carbs are funky, right? They're upside down, backwards. But what would happen is it would crack open a little bit here, but the other one wouldn't respond yet until it kind of took up the slack in that bar, and then it would open up. And that's really important for idle and lower RPM like that. But once you open it up and you begin to open it up more, it becomes less different. 1 millimeter when you're dealing with 1 to 5 millimeters is a lot less or more significant than if you're dealing with 100 millimeters and 101 millimeters, if that makes any sense. So when they're fully open like this, it doesn't make as much of a difference, but when it's a lower RPM, it does. So we're going to fix that too. That's just a side note. Already took these off. Before I actually cut these a little bit longer, you can kind of see that they're a little bit molded from these stainless steel ear clamps, otherwise known as Edeker clamps or O-Edeker clamps, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Big fan of those things. They're not really meant to be taken on and off too much, and I didn't plan on doing it on this one, but here I am again. But I'll continue to use them, and I'm going to cut these things back when we put it back together. But those are all taken off there to separate them. I'm going to leave them connected here as much as I can and not touch those things. You need this is called a JIS, Japanese Industrial Service head on it. It's like a Phillips, but it's blunted on the end. You can see that in my other videos because these screws on these carburetors, not just these outside ones, but down inside the carburetors, have these really shallow, they look like Phillips screws, but if you try to go after those with a Phillips screwdriver, the point on that thing's going to bottom out and you're going to strip out, your grips on it. And so don't do that. So forgot about the little tiny hoses here for the accelerator pump. You can take those off with the same tool that you put them on with, and you have to kind of pick at them to get them to come off, like this one. Kind of a little pro tip for you. Most people don't tell you to do that, but I would definitely do it. So I'm going to plug off these things here. These are plastic, so be careful you don't break those. You want to push them head on and not rock them side to side too much. So I'm going to block those things off. You don't have to worry about this one because that's actually the pump. You could actually suck on that with your tongue like I did. I know that's gross. That's old school stuff. But if it holds your tongue and doesn't leak, that thing's is okay. So your pump diaphragm is working. This is your main fuel coming in. You can tell it's a bigger hose. And then this is what's feeding the second carb. And then this was the return. That's how they're plumbed. So I'm blocking all of these things off. Okay, we got it all connected up here. This is our makeshift pressure tester you've probably seen before. You can make one of these. Just hit me up if you want me to tell you how to make one. But we're keeping an eye on this. We're going to go up to about 10 psi, about right there. Check it out. And as you can see, this thing is not moving at all. So we're good with that part of it. And what that means is, at least in terms of this mag carburetor, no, this is the PTO carburetor, that this one doesn't have any leaks right now, so at least we know that. So now let's test the other one. Hope you can see this gauge here. Maybe I'll tilt it up like that. Okay, is that better? You can see that. Go up to right at about 10, a little less than 10. It's holding. So that's good. All right, so that means that both these carburetors, in terms of anything leaking, needle and seats leaking, that kind of stuff, all good. Always good to test those things before you open up the carburetor. We're going to only take the metering side off because we are just going to deal with jets and checking a little bit of pop-off pressure and springs. But in any case, this one I need to switch these. Right? PTO, just like that. Now you know why I labeled them. Little anal about that, but I don't like getting stuff mixed up. So we've got our PTO carburetor here. Now this is the diaphragm, and this is a Mikuni rebuild kit. I've opened this up 2 times. I don't want to mess with it too much. It hasn't had a lot of hours on it, but I want to be real careful about that. So I'm just going to take that apart to get down into here and take those jets out, and not all of them, but this is the idle jet. That's the one that we're looking for right here, the little one, not the big one. We're going to leave that one alone, like we said. We're going to leave the needle and seat alone, like we said. 77.5. Get them out with, and so I'm going to take this thing out, and we're going to look at it. I dropped it, and it dropped right on the paper plate. That was not skill, by the way. That was 100% luck. And there is no possible way I can read this thing like this. But I'm going to take a picture of it with the camera, and I'm going to let you guys look at it. Okay, I hope you saw that. That is indeed an 80, and I marked a bag here for 80, and I'm going to put this in there so I don't lose it. And we are going to go ahead and put in our 77.5. Okay, this is pop-off pressure testing 101. Got it all connected up here. Make sure everything else is plugged off except for that input. And then I'm just going to pump it up just a little bit to like less than 10 psi and just push on it. You know, you can just make sure that all that's working. Then what you do is you fill this cavity up with WD-40 just to make sure you know where you are. So you can see that one popped off just before 20, which is 19, right? And that's what we were talking about. Too low. We want to hit 25, which is way over here. So this is pretty peculiar, guys, but no surprise here. I know now why people don't like messing with these white carburetors, but I still got some fight left in me. So I switched between what was in here and my 95s, and they actually looked identical. And I believe that they are both 95s. Couldn't get above 20. So I switched to 80 just to see what it was going to do. And it did pop off earlier like you would expect. So I need a stronger spring, which is very unusual for these skis, but these are unusual carburetors too. Remember, they had the shims in the bottom. So I am going to go source some springs from OSD Marine and the next size up and put those in here, and we'll see what happens with that. Well, snap. So turns out this kind of turned into be a little bit of a complicated mess. I could not get the pop off to be where I wanted it to be, which is about 25. I've tried 80-gram springs. I've tried 95-gram springs, which is what was in it. I have even tried these guys, 115-gram springs, which is crazy. Don't ever try these things. That like raised it up to 30 or 40. Those things are super strong, but I thought I would try it. And so kind of got nowhere to go in the middle here. Um, I did check my gauge, and my gauge compared to another gauge is correct. And so, it's kind of like, I can't get above that 1920 psi. So I'm going to do something really controversial here. And I don't recommend this, at least at this point. I just want to say I'm going to try this because this is a weird science project all the way. But what I've made a little shim here out of a shank off of an aluminum rivet, and I flattened it out a little bit with a hammer. And you can see I've been kind of working down the edges to make it round and smooth. This is about 1 point, got it written down here, 1.13 millimeters. That just happens to be what it is that I'm going to try. And then that 6.6 is the depth of this hole, just so I have an index point so I know, so that when I measure this against the other carburetor, I just want to know how deep that hole is. But I am going to try this. And again, this is kind of weird science stuff. This is not my recommendation. I'm just trying to get this thing within 25 psi. So let's see what happens. Okay, so with a 95-gram spring, I'm getting about 26 now. So from 20 to 26, so that went up about 5. So to try to get this pop off where I wanted it, which is about 25, I ended up I made some shims. There, I said it. I made some shims. They're 0.7 millimeters thick. I pounded out a little piece of flat aluminum from a rivet and shaped it around the edge and made a little medallion and dropped it down in the hole several times on each carburetor and got it to where, they're popping off at about 25. So I did, and this is another embarrassing point, I did bend the levers a little bit. Cringe, I know, I didn't want to do that, but this is kind of like my last hurrah on these carburetors. Again, not recommending you do any of this stuff, just telling you what I'm trying. We're going to put this on the ski and see what happens.